Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Sasse Museum of Art and our monthly conversations with artists. This month we have a really great catalog that Jean's put together with words and art. And we have four artists and poets and writers. Some of them do both, some of them do one or the other. I'm just going to ask them to introduce themselves, like, who are you? What kind of work do you do? And I'm just going to go by my own screen, who's first, second, third. So Lisa Segal, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yes, this is either why it pays to come early or it doesn't pay to come early. So you're like really happy to. When we were off the recording, I did a mini thank you, but now I want to do a big thank you to the familiar faces that I see. And it is also a really nice way. And I use this in the most 2022 way I possibly can. It's a nice way to meet new people. Don't actually get to be next to you, but I can be in this Zoom room with you. So I want to thank you for being here. And I'm in Los Angeles. I'm a visual artist, and it happens that I'm also a writer, a poet, and a writer of prose. So.
And am I right? You're focusing in this collection almost entirely on prose and poems about crows and painting.
Did you say entirely?
Almost entirely.
Crows get in. Crows get in, but and it's nice actually. They got in because I sat under one in my writing spot one day. It came onto a skylight, and I realized I was under a crow in some really private way that the crow didn't know I was there and wasn't going to leave. And so that's how the crow came in as a totem.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And then the person named Seventh Heaven, would you mind muting your microphone? We're getting some background from you. And John Otter, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Sure, hello. So my name's John Otter. I currently live in Claremont. I've been here a couple decades. I grew up in San Diego. Early on, I really was into printmaking, etching, aquatints, things like that. I went to art school at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and came out as a painter. And then within the last decade or two, kind of transformed from painting into drawing. And so, but right now I'm painting again. So kind of all that stuff. My thing is kind of abstraction and colorful works. I guess I'm sure we'll talk about things a little more later.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to talk about the abstraction too. I found it interesting in an exhibition like this. And then Maudi Carlile.
Hello guys, my name is Maudi Carlile, and I am a visual artist, figurative and contemporary abstract-y stuff.
And John Solomon.
John Sollom.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's okay. Norwegian name, kind of a hard thing to pronounce sometimes. Anyways, yeah, I'm a visual artist, painter. I do a lot of kind of like built-up assemblage stuff with my paintings, including like elements of pop art. Pop art. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Pop art, social stuff going on with our country. Trying to keep it right on that borderline edge of like being acceptable and being almost like to the point of maybe not acceptable. As far as visual stimulation goes. That's kind of the work I've been doing for like the last 5-6 years.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you all, and I'm thrilled to see this catalog come out. I thought I'd give it just a quick tour of it. See if I can pull it up here, and you can access all of these at the website for the Sasse Museum of Art. And it starts with a really great introduction by Kate Flannery, who's here as well. And just I was struck by what people were doing, both with the words, but also with the images that include text. And I find that fascinating that you're the way you're able to blend them together. And in some ways it's narrative, in some ways it's not narrative. And maybe we could start with John Otter and your work that is I don't know. I don't. It's not really narrative. You use words, but you're not. You're using them as texture or something. I wonder if you could describe that. And I'll try to bring yours up here.
Sure. So there was a specific series of drawings that I did that were in a book that I found by a dumpster, and I felt sorry for the book, so I kind of rescued it and began doing drawings on the pages. My thought, it was a nice hardbound book, was that I would draw every single page of this book, and it took me probably like 8 or 10 years to get 10 of them done. And it always sat on my bookshelf, so it didn't look like an art supply or anything, and I forgot they were there. I did scan them eventually, and then they got into the exhibition, so I sliced them out, realizing that was not going to be my swan song, that finishing this book. But a lot of my work has a lot of small details, often dots or circles, kind of in a Aboriginal Dreamtime kind of pattern. And I found that text in the background made that same kind of texture that would give you a layer beyond what I was drawing on. So that's kind of the story of that series. I think there was 10 and 9 were in the exhibition. I still have the book, so there could be more eventually. But
well, I've got 2 follow-up questions. First of all, what was the book?
The book is called The Living Bible.
Oh wow! Okay, somebody threw away the Living Bible.
And it was in like a pile of books by a dumpster.
Oh wow!
And it was hardbound. It was probably from the 70s by the look of it. The illustrations were black and white. Everything was black and white, but it was definitely kind of an educational version of the Bible where there's Bible stories. So one of the images, I think it's on this page, has a sandal, like a Roman sandal for some reason. You can, it's like a picture find, yeah, thing that I drew over, and it's in there. And another one includes a diagram of Herod's temple, which is a very gridded out thing that I kind of worked around. There in the middle, yeah. So it's fun to play with pre-existing illustrations and kind of craft them into your own, and then have the text where there's no illustration.
Well, then I see a lot of these paintings have the quality of erasure poetry, and so we have something like this. Is that intentional, and is there direct meaning there? Are you saying something in a linear sort of way?
I wouldn't say linear. I would in that manner of just kind of finding the words that jump out at you on a certain page. One dealt with hieroglyphics and Phoenician and the Rosetta Stone, and those are things that are interesting to me. What is man was a certain question in one of the pages. So things definitely jumped out, and I think considering it was a living Bible, there would be more interesting words or concepts jumping out, more spiritual or, things of interest to me. So, yeah, just kind of grasping around.
That's it. All right. And did you see this as a means of storytelling, either narrative or non-narrative?
I think isolating certain words definitely begins a story. But in general, I think I try to work on different layers of, like with the drawings and paintings, I love layers. And I think by doing that, it gives space for somebody to wander around inside or behind different elements when you have dimensionality. So in a way, kind of a story, but kind of like giving time and space to a piece. being able to come back and wander around. And that's how stories go. They have a beginning and you kind of wander through them, and there's a conclusion most likely, but a lot of the postmodern writers or poets don't start at the beginning and finish at the end. So it's that wandering of kind of weaving, an interesting image.
Mm-hmm.
If
Are you
that would
thinking
be
about
like
almost like an Oulipo writer or something? Yeah. Okay. And then Lisa, you kind of do both. You've got storytelling going on, I think, through the series of your Raven and Crows, and then you're using the text also as texture and background. I'm taking a look at this page, which is, what are this? It's 80 and 81. And these are both here. And I'm saying in the background here, you're using text. It's not English. And over here, you have this sort of ongoing Crow narrative. And then you're also writing poetry as well.
Well, I'm very happy to be on this spread with Maudi. Maudi is the one who's got the text on the left, but
You're right.
If you can flip through, I'm not sure which page it's on. The two things, Crow shows up in a way that isn't a literal representation of Crow, but if you can go through,
Is it this guy? No, that's not you.
no, I'm going to talk while you're doing this. It'll give everybody a chance to see in anyway. And why wouldn't it be true that you've gone the wrong direction? But like John's text, which can't really be there, that's it. Go back. This one. This is a poem. This was a poem, but it never became a poem because I commandeered it to be a text element because it synchronized itself with something that was happening in the art studio for me. And I had always been looking for a way to put language and words into my work, but I never felt comfortable about choosing a word and putting it in. So what does this have to do with crows? When I was working on this kind of visual, at totally random kind of visual, and the crows simultaneously, it came to be that I understood something about language, which is sometimes you can almost understand what is being said. And often you can't really. And I think that that's part of something that happens with John Otter's pieces as well. When you look at his work, you almost can read it when he talked about his text being a texture in the background. And for me, I suddenly one day had this picture that the crows that we have all around us all the time, we hear them and we know they're speaking a language, and this is what their language sounds like to me. And I thought, betcha that's what our language sounds like to them. So there's something kind of, interesting to me about how near comprehension can be. And what you do comprehend might not be a literal takeaway.
So are you working with ideas of deconstruction? Kind of almost Derrida kind of approach to language?
It seems as if I've steered myself in that direction. Yeah. I didn't set myself in that direction, but I've found myself in that direction.
Do your pieces have narrative to them? I mean, this one clearly you're working on anti-narrative almost, but like I'm going to try to get to some of. I think you have a ghazal at some point. I'll try to find that page. Was that a ghazal? Was I right about that?
32, 33.
Yes. Yeah, right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is that same text element deployed in a completely different way. This one is very, very many simplified crow cutouts arranged in this pinwheel configuration. And the poem
Huh.
came from that energetic back and forth and aroundness. But it's crows also. If you were to deconstruct that piece, you would end up with a lot of crow cutouts.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, you know, I maybe we should move on to Maudi's piece. I misattributed it to you a moment ago. I'm sorry about that. I apologize. But let's
Hey,
take a look
JD.
at this. Thank you. And Maudi, just wondering how you're using the background here and what you see the play between text and image.
These are cutouts from a newspaper I actually got in Chinatown in Las Vegas a couple weeks before the pandemic hit. So I don't know if you can see on this canvas, but a couple of them you can see the date. It's November 19th, 2019, I think it was. Right after I picked those up, I had been wanting to use them as a background, kind of like the image here of the stone woman curling down, and with the noise, the newspaper, all the symbols and like killing the noise. Killing the noise. And so that's what I was trying to do.
Okay, so it's very much what Kate was talking about in the introduction about there's storytelling happening here. It's just not necessarily the normal kind of storytelling. You're giving us the narrative of this person's, I don't know, moment in time.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Is this typical for your work? Is this the kind of thing you usually do?
Lately, yes. I've been doing more like subtle messages, I would say.
Oh, that's fascinating. Do you use a lot of text in your work?
I do. I do, yes.
That's great. And let's see, John Solomon, let's see, you're on page 114. Oh, yeah, there we go. And what jumped out at me as a former English major is you right at the top there, you've got Notes and Queries, which is a notes journal out of Oxford. And I look around here and I'm getting a lot of nonlinear storytelling. You know, you've got John on the bottom. This is a collage piece, I assume. And
Yeah.
what were you trying to say here? And where are you making reference to that journal specifically?
You know what? I go through like pages and pages of old like periodicals looking for statements and like quotes. That just kind of jumped out at me. Notes and Queries. And you know, it really has little bearing on the overall like creation of the piece. Everything's kind of like a big collective internal consummation of culture and like politics and you know what we're going through as a nation in the United States, racism, you know, the Me Too movement stuff. It's really kind of loosely based on a lot of you know, that kind of subject matter. You know, of course, what's going on right now in Ukraine, and that's going to be in the future paintings. But I always want to keep kind of like a lot of the light-hearted stuff. Also, you know, like looking at this piece, Mickey Mouse, and the man and the woman plastering wallboard, and that little picture of Arnold Schwarzenegger trying to pull up some weights. And as my own my own personal health issues, I always like putting athletic people doing exercise because I'm kind of envious, you know, of the flexibility and the strength, you know, like the woman in the very center doing a handstand. You know, that's like, geez, I wish I could do that. You know? So my work is very kind of like, it's very what I'm doing in my own internal self, but what I could like also throw out in the world. You know what I mean? It's like the you know, a lot of politics, you know, a lot of subject matter. You know, it's kind of like a circus event almost. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on.
And if I could just ask about the material, is this a 3D collage, or are there objects on?
Yeah, John, it's 3D. You know, I could go through the list. I use like a lot of wood, fabric. I paint individual panels, usually with oil paint, but I'm switching to acrylic paint because it dries faster. I collect a lot of old frames. I mix it in with latex paint, spray paint, and I also build like a lot of the stuff, you know, like the intricate little boxes. A lot of the stuff I'll build myself, and you know, it's always an experiment. Every painting I do, you know, there's a lot of beating up, a lot of internal stuff going on. You know, it's like not only am I hammering on the paintings, but I'm hammering on myself. You know, trying to make a composition. It's a very physical kind of way of working. You know, but also keeping in my experience as a painter. You know what I mean? And just trying to put that on canvas.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing here, and I'm also gonna invite anybody who's here to please pitch in and ask questions. Any questions you'd like, just either raise your hand or jump in. But I'd like to open this up just to all the artists. And you know, in Kate's introduction, she talks about the concept of storytelling, and I'm wondering if you all see yourselves as storytellers primarily, or if message matters to you. And I'm thinking about you're talking about John Otter. You're talking about like your abstraction. Is that anti-story, or is that just a different way of telling story? Or
I guess I don't see it as a story necessarily, as an experience. I want people to find their own. It's like a choose your own adventure. Is that a story? Because the viewer or the reader gets to choose, where the person who created it doesn't necessarily have the story laid out as far as how we know stories. So storytelling to me is, you have this plan and you produce it to create the end result. I like to have something created where people can take their time and kind of wander aimlessly if they want, and in and out and decide. I think ideally I would like work that could hang in somebody's house for 10 years and they would still come back and see a different angle or a different way about it. So I don't know that that's a story necessarily, but I do think it's kind of, stories have the same power of wandering through things and developing new ideas or new perspectives.
well, it's a visual vignette then.
Is it a vignette? That seems limiting.
Okay, that's great.
Right? Because I don't see the edges of it necessarily. Even though it's a rectangle, when there's a shape that swoops off to the left, can you just follow it with your mind? You know, can you be outside of that shape? Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so that's interesting. So the work extends beyond the edges of the canvas.
I think so. For me, when you make a horizon line in a rectangle, it keeps going, right? You can kind of imagine it out. But maybe that's just me. I don't know.
Well, it's an interesting way of using the viewer as part of the art creation.
So back in Dutch landscape, where they were painting something that was to be a window, So you're in your little house and you see this painting and you see it as looking outside. So the horizon would, in your mind, kind of extend forever. And in the abstraction, I can imagine those swirls and lines and odd things just going on and on.
Oh, that's interesting. And Lisa, do you see, same question to you, just how is this, what is your role as storyteller or as place creator?
It's a good question. I would say that in my visual art, I'm more of a facilitator. I am not necessarily a narrative artist. However, in this show, I did come close to having something narrative, but the viewer supplies it themselves, as I think with all things. I think you stand in front of any piece of art and a narrative comes to the individual, no matter where it is on the range from hyperrealism to abstract. But in this show, I have a map of Los Angeles, pretty much metro Los Angeles, that I built out like little tiny modes of transportation, cars and little Volkswagen cars and airplanes and a helicopter and a boat, and placed them on the map. And you cannot have a map without thinking of narratives. Everybody's had a map in their hand. Maybe they haven't had a map of Los Angeles, but if they have had a map of Los Angeles, at the opening, I saw people standing there pointing, and if I was there, they would say to me, "We came from here," because Californians, we have to always say, "How did we get here?" Right? So it easily was narrative, but it wasn't my story, except I do live near LAX. I do live near LAX. So that also makes me live, in a certain geographical place. I have my story, but everybody that looks at a map, I think, does have a story. And I remember when I was making this piece, the night that I thought I was done, I thought I was finishing it, and I went to bed, and as I was closing the studio door behind me, I remember thinking, it needs palm trees. I'm like, no, you need to be done. No, you need palm trees. And so what's down in the lower right-hand corner, you're looking at, palm trees. And why? Because that's the story of Los Angeles. They may not be native, but they're here and they define Los Angeles. And, even as much as, so I'm a facilitator. I think I'm a facilitator. I think that poetry leads people a little bit more directly somewhere than the visual art does. But even in the poetry, there's a place for me, but there's a place for you. It's your story too.
I think very much like John's, the viewer is part of the storytelling experience here.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe the same question to Maudi. If how do you engage in storytelling, or do you? Is this as an artist, do you see that as part of your mission?
I do. I feel like it kind of just happens on its own. I don't really. It's not something I like plan on doing. I think I just kind of gravitate towards it, painting things that I personally experience or see.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I would definitely say that it's narrative.
That's really interesting. Are you allowing your subconscious to help you construct them?
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Is that a process that you can describe?
Yeah. I Most of my paintings have a kind of a loud like background, like very colorful, or like with the newspaper with all of the symbols and words and stuff. And then I kind of like hone it in on a figurative image, like the below the clouds that was up at the exhibit. It's kind of abstracty in the background, and I just allow myself to just play with the contrast and the tones. And I have some newspaper on that as well, the same newspaper I used on the vanity canvas. And then I use the image of the stone angel with the wings hanging down below the clouds. I named it Below the Clouds because of just living in a fallen world. And yeah.
Great. Well, that's interesting. How do you find? How do you decide then on your background, or do you let the background just kind of?
I let it go. I just work on it until I feel that I love it, and that's what I was going for. That one I worked on it for a while because I was just using different colors and trying to figure out where I wanted to place the stone angel and the newspaper. Pastel oils scribbles up on the top, and I just allowed myself to create, to just really put it all on the canvas until I felt it was right where I wanted it to be.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's so far we have three people who are saying basically that part of the creation of the story is the viewers. It's the viewers doing that as well. And I'm wondering if our fourth artist, John Sollom, if you see that as well, or do you have a more direct sort of way of getting people to understand story, or are you letting them create their own thing?
I love Lisa Segal's stuff, and I like her, how it's like you want the viewer to create their own narrative. That's kind of where I'm going with my work. There's so much of my own personality in the work. You can't just throw out your own stuff. People have to understand it. Let them visualize their own interpretation of the work. My work is it's kind of a crazy collage, assemblage, social kind of nightmare. There's a lot of stuff going on. It comes from like multiple viewpoints. I have a collective of artists that I want to put in my work. I really love. I love Rauschenberg, Jeff Johns, I love Andy Warhol, Paul Goldenberg. I like a lot of stuff. I also love like what's going on in our country at the very moment. I'm very tuned in with what America has been going through like the last 4 or 5 years. And also, what's going on with the world, the crap that Ukraine.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's like every morning I get up, I have to take a deep breath. Man, I have to get some fresh air before the shit hits the fan. And I want people to see that in my work. I don't know if I'm selfish or whatever, but I worry about our future. I worry about not just my own artistic life, but when am I going to buy an electric car? It's like, am I putting my name on the waiting list for the next 2 years or what?
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know. That the piece I did for the show, it might be hitting on some of those things, but I have a huge body of work, and each piece is different.
It's that's correct. It's interesting for me. That piece brought me right back to the '90s, and it was a completely personal thing because that's when I was in graduate school, and I was looking at that journal notes and queries a lot, and then of course you've got John on that picture, and he was figuring high in the '90s, and I'm guessing that happens to a lot of people that they interact with your work and they kind of go off in their own direction. It's a sort of a personal narrative storytelling. And yeah, okay. I'm guessing that's also your goal as well.
Yeah, you know what? My goal is, trying to make it a successful art piece. It's frustrating because I go through a lot of material to put something together. I have a, hold on a second, let me get my computer. I have do you see like these shelves?
You have your finger on the camera.
I'm sorry. Is that better?
Yeah, that's good.
I have like hundreds of like these little paintings I've been doing, and
Wow.
they're all each part of like a bigger picture. It's like so. It's always a work in progress, my friend.
Yeah. Well, when
I like the background so white, and there's like two diagonal lines going up to your brain. Was that done on purpose?
Well, now that I live in New York, I've got an attic.
So simple. I want that. I want that image in my life.
I'm doing everything I can to blur out the one bulb in my attic. Right. But I got a little bit of a halo. So yeah. Well, it's really interesting because when you're going through a time period, you don't know what narrative the future is going to create from it, and all you have is these slivers. And it feels to me that's very much what's going on in your art. It's like,
isn't it funny how like I love painting like these historical images like from like 20, 40, 50 years ago, and then you have like what's going on now, and everything kind of comes back 24/7. It's a crazy experience. How you doing, kiddo? I see you.
I'm gonna open up the thing for questions. It looks to me like Gene might have a question.
Yeah, I've got a question for you, John. Being that you're a writer or poet, how does the exhibit resonate with you with the quotes and poems and stories along with the art? How does that resonate with you?
I'm not a visual thinker at all. I have a very hard time creating images in my head, and it really helps me to have words to give meaning to all this. And of course, the words create a meaning that might not have necessarily been intended by the artist or even the authors, but it's creating story within story, and I find that absolutely fascinating. I love that you're going back to like Leo Tolstoy too. It's not just local artists and in terms of time. It's like we're creating connections across time and across boundaries, and I really love that as well. And I love the poetry in there. It's a lot of it is kind of nonlinear, kind of bouncing around poetry, and I love that. That fits the exhibit very well. And it looks like Tressa has a question.
Hi everyone. Yeah, my question is not so boiled down, but it's maybe more observational. I haven't had a chance to look at the whole catalog yet, but from what I've seen so far, since everyone's really working in multi-textual languages, both verbal and visual, I'm most familiar with Lisa's work, so I'm going to direct this to her and maybe hone in on the crow, because she knows I love Basho's crow. And I love what you said, Lisa, about being a facilitator. And as you were describing that in relation to your work, I thought, also see you as an interpolator, putting the words inside of the images and vice versa, kind of doing the inside out thing. And so when you talk about crow, I love that image of you sitting and listening to your language and crow's language. And then you talked about how that's deconstructed. And I actually see it, you know, throughout not only the works here, but in your larger body of work. And I wonder if maybe you could speak a little bit more to that voice, you know, crow's language. Is that a muse? And what is that voice? How does that voice get deconstructed?
Hi, Tressa.
Hi.
Okay, thank you for that. I haven't thought about that, so I'm going to think about that while my mouth is moving.
Sure. Yeah.
Try to
No, I mean,
articulate that. And what I thought, you know, what struck me is I have no more idea what Crow is saying than I do in one of my capacities. You know, because I teach writing, I do stand that I know what I'm talking about there. But in my private practice as a poet, I am writing to find out what I have to say. So I no more understand that than how I understand Crow. That's why I think that representation, that abstract representation of sound, that's what I think that it is. You know, like an abstract representation of sound. That sound can have meaning. Isn't that what music is? You know, don't we rely on music to address a narrative or a story in a non-verbal kind of way, if we're talking orchestral? I'm willing to share in this conversation. It looks like John wanted to say something too.
Yeah, John Otter.
I would just say that even though Crow's language is not our own, I don't think it would be impossible to understand a little bit of it, that we can learn, we can train our ears to hear their distress calls or their mating calls, right? So it's not a completely foreign world, but we can abstract it and just say, okay, I don't understand that language, right? Because I love the scripts, the writing scripts of every culture. I've studied Hebrew and Aramaic, and the lettering, you know, been able to make any of it, bets down, and then understand how they look. Arabic, by far, I started having wild dreams because it's not like our lettering. So it's a language that I still don't know, but you can become more familiar with, and you can say it's not just, you know, so different as ours. I mean, that is a language that we could
John,
understand.
You're right, because you've reminded me. One morning I was out on my streets in my very suburban neighborhood, but of course we have coyotes because we've taken what was left of their habitat and we're building on it. And I heard some crows. I hear crows all the time, we all do. And I heard something different about these crows. You're absolutely right. And I turned around and they were chasing a coyote. It was probably 8 o'clock in the morning. And they were chasing a coyote down the middle of this, you know, of my neighborhood street. So bingo, I absolutely, you know, I didn't hear coyote, but I heard coyote.
Distress, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't hear coyote, but I heard distress.
Right.
You're right. I heard this is different. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you,
everybody.
Tressa.
Yeah, beautiful. A lot to think about. Thanks.
All right. Well, maybe a good question would be to Jean. We've got 4 fabulous artists here, and I'm sure you would have loved to have all the artists. Is there anybody you'd like us to draw our attention to in the catalog? Anything that really, for you, it's like, oh, this has to be in there?
Wow. You know, it was a work in progress. And there was a piece that we got in the collection early on by Nancy Tolbert Stewart, and titled The Night Before I Die, I think it was from a book. And then when Lisa had the exhibit at the museum, and with some of her pieces and the stories behind it. And between those two is how this came apart. And also April being National Poetry Month, so I thought it'd be fun to do something tied into that. And originally all the art was going to have some sort of characters in it, but once I started putting it together and working on it, it took a life of its own. And even up to a few days before I was hanging, there was changes that were made. And when I was hanging, I pulled out a couple of pieces that were in the collection and replaced them with others. So the catalog has a few pieces that is not in the physical exhibit, but I'm not a writer. I wish I was, and it's a struggle to do it. But I like books, I like art, and I like combining the two and giving a narrative. It may not be what the art is about, but it forces you to stop and think, and and the story between and how they talk to each other.
Mm-hmm. There's a tension there that creates a subtext.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't know that I want to put you on the spot here, Kate, but you provided the introduction. I was wondering what you took away from these. You looked at this collection very, very closely. So I guess I am putting you on the spot.
Yes, you are. Actually, I think what I'm gathering, hearing the artists talk, and also even hearing Gene talk about his sort of curation of the catalog, is that the process of creating something is where the visual artist and the artist of the word can really meet and share. And it's in that sort of what an artist that I knew and admired, Father Bill Moore, used to talk about, the transcendence that happens when he's creating something. And I hear it from every artist who's spoken this evening. They all talk about the process and how it kind of comes together, and it's very organic, and it's very some people would say creative, of course, but that's what I sort of really love about putting the visual art and the art of the word together, because something else happens. And it's a wonderful experience, I'm sure, for the artist. I know as a writer, that's what I'm always aiming for, is that sort of transcendence and going someplace else. And hoping that whoever reads the written word or sees the art will kind of journey along, and not necessarily in lockstep, but that it's a shared experience that is really quite wonderful. So it's lovely to hear that tonight.
You're almost talking about the spiritual journey of the art and the artist.
Sure, yeah.
And John, you asked me about a piece in the exhibit on page 12 and 13. There's a lithograph from the late 1800s, and two children looking at a book. And I thought that was real interesting, and I liked the piece that I put with it, and the story that's between the two.
Oh yeah, well, you can't go wrong with Neil Gaiman, right? That's great. All right. Well, this is a good point to transition. See if anybody has any final questions or comments for us. Yeah, Lisa.
Okay. Those who are in class with me know that this is kind of a familiar thing. Just when you showed us that lithograph, and I thought, and you made a point of saying child, and I thought to childhood, and I thought again how the way a young mind starts to become part of the larger world and starts to comprehend themselves as part of it is to make that bridge between visual and semantic. And so we managed to find a way to be in the world, building that bridge between the visual and the semantic. And I know that, but just in that moment, I got a new sort of reverberation of how they are not separate from each other,
Oh,
and
that's
how they're
interesting.
so personal. You
Yeah.
know?
Oh, that's interesting. This show is still up, is it not?
Yes, it'll be up through the end of April. It comes down May 1st.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that, Lisa, and thank you, everybody. Thank you, John, and one of the Johns, I think his iPad kicked him out. Thank you, Maudi. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Jean and Kate, for all your great work. I hope you all can go see the exhibit for me. I can't see it. I'm 3,000 miles away, but I hope you all can see it and spend some time in the Sasse Museum. Is there what time is the museum open and ready for visitors, Gene?
It's Tuesday, Wednesday from 1 to 5, Saturday night from 5 to 9, and then Sunday 2 to 5. And if somebody wants to go on a Thursday or Friday, let me know and I can meet you there and let you in. We're trying to find somebody that can sit in the gallery on Thursdays and Fridays so we can be back open during that time. But also the Art Talk next month will be artists and writers from this exhibit again.
Oh, that's great.
So you get to see another perspective of another group of people.
Yeah. And
Jean, I really want to thank you. You know, if each of us artists don't have a chance to thank you, then let me, on behalf of all of us, say thank you. And John, thank you. And Kate, thank you for your intro. Thank you for your outro too, John. And to everybody that we exhibited together. I think it's a wonderful show. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next month at our next Art Talk.
Yeah, thank you for being here, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Take care.